Ari here from the Music Factory, and we're doing our sixth version of the podcast that we're starting. And we have Jessica Lurie here, who's an amazing saxophone player, multi instrumentalist, and Jessica uh, in Seattle, Washington. She's currently living in Brooklyn, New York. She's played all over the world. She's an incredible musician, incredible person. Always a pleasure to see play, and always a pleasure to play with as well. So, how you doing, Jessica?
Doing good. Doing good. Hanging out here in Brooklyn. It's real quiet. We're all on curfew tonight, so we're keeping quiet here in Brooklyn for once. But it's good. It's good.
And you were just playing earlier today at
Yeah, I was in the we with my friend Kenny Wallison, who's a really great drummer, who's played on he's played with Laurie Anderson and I don't know, John Zorn. He's played with so many people. In the sort of Nora Jones. I mean, in both pop worlds and jazz worlds. But I've played with him for years in this sort of avant-garde marching band called the Himalayas, and everyone brought in a lot of original material. And usually it's a really big band, but because there was still in this pandemic reality, um, not too many people were around. But there was this march for George Floyd today, and just Black Lives Matter. So we sort of made the little Black Lives Matter anti-fascist marching band, and also a good friend Elizabeth Pupa Walker, incredible percussionist. She joined us. So she lived in Seattle for like 10 years. So yeah, we had this kind of great jam. We're gonna post some stuff on Instagram about it and all. But yeah, I was playing soprano. Now that I play all the saxophones, uh, I don't play a bass saxophone, but baritone, tenor, soprano. Alto's good. Alto's good for marching. Huh?
I saw you play the Barry
Sorry, you
saxophone.
cut out.
I saw you play a bass saxophone
Yes, I
recently.
played a bass saxophone too. Yeah, I got to borrow one in New Orleans. It was I haven't I guess last time I played one was a year ago. They're really great though. If I get people like, you should play this, I'm like, you should buy me one because
Yeah.
they're
Which
not a
are
cheap instrument. but but they're great because it's like you're like a tuba. I mean, you're really like a tuba, more so than a baritone, which is awesome. But that's
so yeah, that's great that you're playing at the protest, and it's crazy what's going on in the world. How have you been sort of coping with the quarantine life,
uh
adapting?
well, it's I play in the saxophone, it's all women sax quartet. That originally we started in Seattle. We're now called the Tipton's Saxophone Quartet and Drums. We were the Billy Tipton Memorial Saxophone Quartet and Drums, I think. And we were on tour in March, and half of our tour got canceled basically, and we got out on the 13th of March, just like had to cancel a bunch of concerts, change our tickets, and we got out like right before everything got very difficult to come back. And then I just came back to New York where everything was the next day, like totally shut down. I mean, people in New York had already been sort of doing that, but yeah, it was like insta quarantine. And then, you know, you have all this time on your hands, so you practice a lot, but then you're like, I don't know. So trying to catch up on things, and I haven't done my big, lots of solo podcast yet, but one
Yeah.
day soon. I don't know. I'm playing around with my pedals, my loopers. I'm not satisfied with my loopers really. All my stomp boxes seem a little offline at the moment. So
Mm.
considering they're never online, which is why I like them. But no, things are doing good. Working on new music, doing a lot of Zoom conferencing, trying to figure out software so that you can actually play with people without incredible amounts of delay. And as you know, Zoom is difficult for that. So yeah, it's like many people were all tackling the softwares and the apps that are out there so that we can connect with people. Since I mean, soon I think we'll be able to be back in spaces, even if we're socially distanced, for playing with people. But like Seattle has a lot more space. Like I can think of several places in Seattle where like immediately you could play and you'd have enough room. In New York, it's like, where could you go where everyone's going to feel okay about, you know,
Yeah.
being in the same space. So anyway, and everyone, deals with this differently, but and I've been sewing masks for people.
That's awesome.
So that's been my that's been my pandemic side gig.
Let's go into like when you first started playing music. Like, how did you get into music?
When I was a wee tot, well, I grew up in Seattle, and my dad played a lot of music, chamber music, violin, viola, piano, cello, harpsichord. Like there were lots of instruments around, and I think I started playing piano when I was like, I don't know, 3 or 4 or something. I remember taking lessons and having a teacher when I was 5 who thought I was really good and had me play in front of his class at the University of Washington when I was 5 years old.
Yeah.
I remember thinking that was rather odd, but anyway, um, but yeah, I really liked playing piano, and then I forget. I guess when I went to South Shore Middle School, I had when I was 10 years old, and I in 5th grade. This is when things were still divided up by K through 4 and then 5 through 8. Different dividing system than now. But I went to South Shore Middle School in Rainier Beach in Seattle, and I had Mr. Nat, who
You're
was
Nat.
this Mr. Nat, KnaATT, and he always had a pack of cool menthol cigarettes. And he was this skinny, badass black man who was just like, he
Yeah.
would just like throw erasers at people and be like, "What's the matter?" And there must have been like, I don't know, every kid who stuck through, we had band 5 days a week. It was amazing. We had band 5 days a week for an hour or whatever, 50 minutes a day. And I guess for some reason, I think when I was little, they tried to see if I could play violin, and like concluded rather quickly that I wasn't too good at that. I was like,
Yeah.
and so I picked up flute because I like classical music. I don't know. So I started playing flute, and then really got into classical flute playing. And but then we were also playing band and pop stuff, and so yeah, I think that class, I think actually South Shore Middle School in Rainier Beach was really instrumental in me being like wanting to be like a professional musician in a way, because we had music every day, and like we got to go to see to the Seattle Opera House and see the orchestra play, and have they would do the school field trips where you could get to see all these great performers, um, and yeah, and then I was taking lessons outside of that, and with Jill Drummond, who is the mother of Anne Drummond, who also from Seattle and who now lives in New York also,
Yeah.
jazz flute player.
Mhm.
Um, and I was playing a lot of Baroque. I got really into Baroque music, so I actually have a Baroque flute, and I liked it. Like, I love classical music, but I didn't really like the sort of some of the backstabbing attitudes that were happening within the classical music thing. I'm pretty competitive, but somehow it was like this there was somehow the joy of the classical music was getting drained from it, in like these competitions I was doing, and sort of these music, Maristone Music Festival, whatever, music camps in Washington. And so I got into Baroque music, I think, because you can do ornamentation in it, but and there's rules, but you can sort of put your own personality into the music more. And uh, and then when I went to high school, I went to the Northwest School, which is an arts high school on First Hill in Seattle. And this was in the early years where we had Floyd Standifer, who was this trumpet player in Seattle, sort of a legend, and
Yeah.
he was teaching the music program. And then there was also classical music. So I got more into jazz, and I guess, yeah, through friends, just started listening to a whole bunch more jazz and rock and Frank Zappa and like just a whole bunch of other crazy, amazing stuff that changed my view. And also Jethro Tull, Ian Anderson, who learned it all from Rahsaan Roland Kirk in terms of like experimental flute playing, and playing a lot of, just sort of funk and sort of pop flute stuff. But the thing about the flute, it's like a lot of flute players, they they often tend to want to play bass lines because it's like you're in this register where you just don't have that low bass thing. So I think by the end of high school, like after playing, still playing a lot of classical music, um, and getting more and more into jazz, it's like I was like, someone said you should pick up saxophone, for You should try it for jazz. And I realized the big thing about saxophone is that it's just louder. I mean, it's an amazing, I love playing saxophone, but if, as a flute player, it's like, oh, it's louder. So I still play a lot of flute, but, and so basically I went to Wesleyan University and I picked up saxophone there and practiced a lot every day because I think I sounded like a Canadian goose for the first year or so.
Like, what other moments can you remember that like really, like even going back far or, anywhere in your life, but, I often wonder, like, what are those moments when you were really young or younger and
Well, I remember I mean, my dad always listened to my parents always both listened to a lot of music and I mean, it's funny. It's like thinking about like musical influences. I'm like, well, James Taylor. Which like now when I think about James Taylor, I'm like, well, he got a kind of sappy, but there was some some of his original songwriting was like really awesome. Or Diana Ross, in the early days. Or oh man, we listened to a hell of a lot of Elton John, and we listened to. But then my dad would do chamber music like two times a week in the house. Like there would be string quartets or
amazing thing that's really
so it's like I would just sit there on the steps so there would be madrigal groups. There'd be these people are like they're singing music and I would just sit there and listen to it as a kid, and I loved listening to string quartets. And then as I got older, then sometimes we would do woodwind. There was something where it was flute was incorporated. It's funny with the classical thing, I think now I think I have a really good sense of time, but it's funny with classical, I think I was decent, but once I started studying jazz, my whole ability, this is just an aside, my whole ability to count more difficult subdivisions and really have the pocket on the beat, that changed. I mean, I think I had it in some music, but it's just interesting when you realize by studying more rhythmic stuff and by working away from the page. I mean, I think I always had a strong ear, but in terms of doing improvisations and stuff, that where you've got to be in time, or you've got to be creating something over a chord progression in time, or working on syncopated rhythms, then all of a sudden coming back to playing classical music, it was like, oh, my whole counting's much better and more solid. And that was, I don't know, that was just an aside.
I mean, it's interesting that, the classical connection. I mean, a lot of the stuff, the bebop stuff in particular, a lot of that stuff they took from classical music.
Yeah,
if you look
but
at, I mean, Barry Harris would kind of go into this too. He would take some Bach or something and show you how Bach is just chord tones on downbeats and passing tones on upbeats.
mm-hmm.
Bebop, it's the same thing. Like the passing tones are on the upbeats, and I think that's like a typical mistake a lot of young or immature kind of you can hear someone, are they playing it right or not or something, and it's like knowing when to put the different elements
Right. Yeah, I mean, yeah, and also and just doing it a lot, playing it a lot. But also it's funny, it's I mean, it's hokey, but if you take Bach and you kind of swing Bach, then you're oh yeah, dun, 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 dun. It's becomes like ragtime almost, which is the predecessor also into jazz. So but yeah, I mean, and Charlie Parker, his way of outlining chords and everything, I love playing through Parker stuff.
Have you had many jobs outside of music in your life, or?
Well, I think, I mean, I was a recycling coordinator, for 5 years when I came back. I mean, but I was still gigging a lot at night, and then it was sort of burning the candle both ends. And then I had enough gigs that I quit, but they were like, oh, how about we just hold your job for you? Because I was like, I'm going on tour for 2 months. And they were like, oh, well, let's hold your job for when you come back. And so I came back and worked part-time. I mean, I think after that, I have been really fortunate that the work that I've done has all been around music mostly, whether it's teaching or composing or studio recording or, freelance playing in things, or composing for other people, or composing for theater, for dance, or for multimedia. So lately, yeah, it's been all around music, but it's not always the steadiest income. I mean, it depends. Again, if you tour a bunch, then it's hard to keep students the same way. So then I guess when I moved to New York, I had a bunch of private students when I was in Seattle, but then when I moved to New York, uh, what was that, 2003? I guess it wasn't until I stopped touring as much in like 2005 or 2006, and then I started doing all these teaching artist residencies,
Hmm.
which is, so it's all teaching, but it's like going into schools and teaching a class of 30 people how to, like,
Yeah.
teaching fifth graders how to compose, or
Hmm.
and how to tell their stories, like, and designing a bunch of education programs for like how to get kids into music who may not necessarily be musicians or may not necessarily play an instrument, but using, because there's so much value in music as a way to express ideas, or what do you hear in the music, that what is the story you hear in the music, and how do you, I don't know, it's a whole different layer, the level of communication that we need. But um yeah, so I guess and I was just fortunate that a lot of those jobs happened, but then also it was always balanced with a lot of performing stuff. So yeah, for the last 15 years or so, 20 years, it's basically all been about music. Which
Yeah,
is
it's great.
awesome. I mean, but now with the pandemic, it's like burp. It's like all these tours and things have, canceled or been postponed. And so but fortunately the online thing is really coming together more. So um and we're adapting to it. So I'm thankful that the technology is where it is, and that hopefully it's not it's sometimes very frustrating when you're trying to do a lesson online with people, just to hear them as well as I would like, as you can in real time.
Hmm.
But, or, yeah, but I like doing it. So you're still I mean, you're still connecting and communicating musical ideas with people, which is great.
Yeah, and if you need to pay your rent, it's also a nice job.
Totally.
Uh,
Yeah, it's a great job.
and there's also people. I mean, there are some techniques. I mean, I haven't been doing it as much as my teachers have, but I have done a few, and I've been talking to everybody about it, and um, you know, trying to sort of like ease on and off the gas a bit about your intensity of
Hmm.
the message across. Like, having certain times when you're really, you got to let the student know they really need to pay attention to you, and you need to get this point across, and this is really
Right.
this. And then a certain amount of just like, how's it going? And I think that like just hanging out with
Just
some
like connecting. Yeah, totally.
connecting, because these days we need more connection, number one, but number two, I think a lot of people who are choosing to take lessons with an artist in this time are sensitive to the fact that they're really helping that artist out as well, and
Yeah.
happy to just hang out and talk a little bit, and there's some students who just, and there's also that other side of it where people sometimes talk so much,
I know. And you're like, okay, can you put your horn together? Like,
talk so much that especially when you're trying to like really work on some rudiments, some people
right.
have an aversion to the act of learning,
Hmm. Yeah.
that's something that's interesting, when I'm teaching a younger student, because I'm not really actually necessarily teaching them how to play an instrument as much as just how to actually learn,
Right.
but it's so important when you're learning to, as slow stuff down to a really slow level,
Hmm.
pick a very small piece to chew on, and really get a lot of repetition on that small piece. um,
Yeah.
but yeah, there's other, yeah, I mean, I guess we'll evolve, I mean, you've done Jam Kazam? Yeah.
Well, I haven't done jam. No, actually, that's something that's hopefully going to happen this week, because the thing about Jam Kazam, it's all about the zip code. You have to be in the same zip code.
Is it?
Otherwise, so like I was trying to do it with some people in Seattle, and that was like a disaster. So now there's a few people in New York where our plan is actually to meet tomorrow and try to, like, can we, um,
Yeah.
can we make this work? So.
Same zip code, can't you just meet in a park and stay 6 feet apart?
Well, exactly. That's kind of, yeah, that would be better. I think, yeah, the whole thing about Jam Kazam is that the delay, like going from like Seattle to New York, the latency becomes greater by the miles.
Mm.
So, but it seems to work for a lot of people. So, I mean, I don't think anything's perfect yet, but
Yeah, and I'm sure that there's technologies out there that are being worked on. I mean, there is one program I tried called Ninjam,
Oh, I saw that. I haven't done it though. Is it any good?
Well, the deal is, if you have Ableton, right,
Right.
it does the math so that you're playing together, but you're actually like a bar off.
Right. Well,
Or
that's better. That's better than Jammer, where you're like a whole cycle off. That's like
yeah, it
that delay is really weird. Yeah.
actually kind of works. Like if you're playing a one chord groove, you can
Yeah, totally.
someone and they can respond, and it's a little different than you would think, but you don't really know what's actually
Right.
where it is actually.
Or with percussion. I played with a percussionist on Jammer, and it was great because like, yeah, I'm not waiting for the chord progression to come around, or I'm not, but
Yeah, can you imagine being like, or just like ridiculously analytical geniuses playing giant steps like two beats off from each other?
or like, yeah, or 6 beats out, something really weird. Like you have to really know where the pause is. But yeah,
Yeah.
crazy.
And so anyway, you've taken your music all over the world. Uh,
Yeah, I've toured. I guess the
you,
most global touring has been with the Tiptons, the saxophone quartet,
yeah.
um, and I've been in that band for, geez, Louise, been in that band since 1993, when the band actually first started really touring outside of Seattle, and we were on the Nitty Factory label. Yeah, and then that led to playing with a whole bunch of different people, and then
You were in Seattle playing with that band in '93.
yeah, when I came back from college. I'm older than you think. I came back from college, and then like I'd gotten grants to compose music with the Seattle Arts Commission and King County Arts Commission, and then I was playing a show with Will Dowd on drums and Fred Challenor, who played in the Tone Dogs with Amy Denio. And Amy came to the show, and then she asked me, and they had a person leaving from their group, and she asked me if I wanted to play with them. So yeah, then that's when it happened. Um, yeah, so I think a lot of things that I've learned about how to be a better musician and a better player has been like just a lot of playing. Like, um, I mean, like people know me from playing with the Living Daylights, where it's very different than a saxophone quartet. But like, I think in the Tiptons is where I actually really got a lot of my saxophone chops together, um, because yeah, it's just different ensemble thing. And like in terms of uh, with Living Daylights, then it was just a trio, bass, saxophones, and drums. So there's a lot more exposure. Um, but yeah, it's and both of those bands. I mean, the Living Daylights have been to Europe a bunch and all over America. The Tiptons toured a fair amount in America, and then we've been to Europe like once or twice every year,
Mm-hmm.
ever since, and gotten that band has also gotten more like grants, sort of experimental music grants, and we wind up at strange experimental music festivals. But yeah, I think I've never played in Asia, I have to say, or Africa.
So would you love to go?
I'd love to go. Yes, I'd
Uh,
love to go. That'd be great.
there is this like quiet revolution of people being able to just perform the way they want to perform, and people being able to support that performance for what it is, in sort of versus that paradigm which we've been all stuck in, where we're playing in bars and we end up
Right.
being basically alcohol salesmen, and it's like
Right. How
people
much
that are
beer do you
to
sell? Exactly.
are they coming because they just want to go to a bar every night and they just love going to a bar every night, and this is the choice of the bar they're going to, which is happens to be someone they really like playing, or are they
Right.
because they want to seek you out, or and also is there like media around that's saying like, hey, check out this event, this is going to be a good event, this is going to be good stuff, so people who
Right.
see good stuff can go to it. So do you have any like music you've released recently, or
Well,
where we can
my last album is my Jessica Lurie ensemble album, which I really like, Long Haul. That came out in 2018. I'm working on new music for that, but I've got a whole bunch of live recordings of live concerts that I'm hoping to release in the next couple weeks on Bandcamp. Like a bunch of just a bunch of live sessions and things that, like, I don't know, it's just sort of wading through them and making sure they sound good. The Tipton Sax Quartet, we have a new recording out called Wabi Sabi, which means the beauty and imperfection, somehow timely for these times. Um, And the Jewish Sephardic music group that I play in, Sophie Salonika, we're trying to finish up an album. It seems to be like one of the longest recording processes I've ever been involved with. But now I'm in the producer chair, so I'm like, chop, chop. Um, so, and that's cool. That's a lot of like, it's some original stuff, but also like traditional Ladino and Turkish tunes, but kind of the feel of the tunes is a little bit different. A lot of Sephardic Jewish music can be very tragic sounding. And usually I've heard it done really operatically and a little less enthusiastically. I guess I kind of do more of a Turkish Balkan sort of thing. There's like a little more high energy to some of these, what would be ordinarily slower songs. And I don't know, trying to work on new music with Arnie Livingston, The Living Daylights.
Nice.
Trying to, get some new stuff happening with that band, even though we all live in different places. So.
Great.
Yeah.
Cool.
So, and well, I wish we'd gone to the studio in January before I went on tour, and then everything fell apart in March. I have this group called Free Theopeaks. So it's the music of Ethiopeaks, like some of the like 60s, 70s.
I've heard some of that music.
Yeah. So that's some amazing, it's like the Ethiopian jazz stuff. So I did a bunch of arrangements. And Frank London sometimes plays in the group, and he did a bunch of arrangements. So, it's really fun music to play. And
like a label that put a lot of that out, because I remember kind of getting.
Well, it was called the Ethiopeaks. I mean, it was a French label that had basically like Ethiopeaks number 4, Ethiopeaks number 5, and then it would be all these different like Mahmoud Ahmed or I don't know, even Astaraweke or what's his name? Getachew, I can never pronounce his last. Anyway, the legendary tenor saxophone player from Ethiopia, who just had this really distinct sound. And yeah, that stuff's really fun. So I'm hoping that will come out. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of projects that are in the works, and then it's just a question of, even though we have all this time on our hands, like how to make it all come together and get out there in the world.
Cool.
Arranging.
I think we got enough stuff. That was really fun.
Cool.
We'll talk.
Hooray! That was a nice tangent that we went on.
It was great to hear about your history and how you started too, and about your parents. I mean, I guess I could have put that together at your parents' plate, or maybe you told me once before.
Maybe, but
the music at your house, and there was a lot of music around.
Yeah, there was just a lot of live music there. I mean, it was mostly all classical, but then, yeah, later, I mean, even in the past, the past 20 years, my dad started doing house concerts there, and he would bring in, he would do a set of classical music, and then I would do a set of jazz music.
Yeah.
And I would come into town, I was either already in Seattle, or I would come into town from New York and just schedule it around, okay, we're going to do a house concert and bring in some of this new music. And, or Tion Dope, he hired him a bunch of times to come and do drumming and have, projects there. So that was cool. My dad was an adventurous music lover, which was good.
That another time.
We'll talk about it another time. All right. Well, thanks so much, Ari.
All right. Bye.
Bye. Have a great night. Bye.